Lamprey external features. So this is a lamprey. It is actually a fish and a fairly simple chordate. This is the head end. Then you have the trunk and the actual caudal end down here by the tail. As far as fins, the lamprey isn't particularly good at swimming because it doesn't need to be. It attaches itself to its host and the host does the swimming for it. So it just has to have some basic swimming ability in order to move from host to host when necessary. So for fins, let me zoom in a little here so you can see better. Okay, so for fins, you have the dorsal fins. It's on the dorsal side. So you have two dorsal fins, this larger one here and the slightly smaller one here. So this is the anterior dorsal fin because it's toward the anterior relative to this one. So this would be the posterior dorsal fin here. And you can see it has this little notch right there. So that's where it ends, the posterior one ends. And then you have the actual caudal fin, which is the fin that goes around the tail here. The tail itself is fairly flat. It's much thinner than the body up here. The reason for that being if it's flat, it provides greater surface area here, and that's what the caudal fin does too, for actually pushing the animal through the water. These would be some stabilization. Okay. Other external features here, you have the head end. Let's look at the ventral surface first. It doesn't really matter what order you view these in, just as long as you see everything and you can identify it. Don't forget to quiz each other as you're going along. Make sure everyone understands everything. It doesn't do much good just say, okay, well, there we found that feature, let's move on, right? Make sure your entire group knows what it is and what it does. And then go back to it every once in a while to remind each other of it. It'll help you remember it much better. So at any rate, dorsal side of the head, the two prominent structures you're going to notice are right here. Okay, so zoom in on that a little more. Oops, wrong direction. Focus. It doesn't seem to want to focus. There, we got focus. Okay, so right here, dorsal. Keep doing that. See, it's easy to mix up. Dorsal side of the head. Here you have this little aperture hole right there. Now don't stick your teasing needle or your probe too far into it because you'll damage the structures inside. But right there, that is called the median nares. Okay, nares basically means nostril. Okay, so the median nares is where water is taken into the animal, and internally, when we do the internal dissection, you'll see internally to this median nares will be an olfactory sac. So this is where the animal will sense chemicals in the water. Basically, it's a sense of smell. There's chemoreceptors inside that olfactory sac that will sense the chemicals in the water and act as a sense of smell. The water itself enters through that median nares. Behind that, so just caudal to that, you will see this light spot. Okay, that's called the pineal eye complex. It is an organ that is able to sense light from dark. So it can't form images. It's kind of called third eye. But don't think of it in terms of, oh, I can form images above my head. Basically what it can do is tell if it's dark on top of it, above the head, or if it's light. So it helps it sense areas of light and dark. Many chordates retain this in some form or another. So in reptiles, actually, many reptiles, you can actually see the pineal eye complex. And in some of the classroom animals we have in the classroom, go look for it, see if you can find it. There's a pineal eye. In the bearded dragons, it's particularly easy to see, and it does the same thing as it senses light from dark. In humans, this has moved interior to inside the brain, and now we have the pineal part of our brain actually is what helps us regulate our sleep cycle, which is sort of to do with light and dark too. So that's kind of an interesting evolution there. Okay, so medianaris pineal eye complex. On the lateral aspect of the head, you'll notice the actual lateral eye. Okay, there's on either side, lateral eye, lateral eye. Okay, that is the eye that can actually form images, or those, since there's two of them. You will also see on the lateral aspect here the gill slits. These are the external gill slits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So these are what allow water in and out into the internal respiratory structures or the gills. Same thing on the other side, gill slits. The lamprey is interesting in that the water can go in and out of these external gill slits. In many fish, water will enter, we'll talk about this more with the shark, but water will enter the mouth and then exit through the gill slits, having passed over the internal gill structures at that point. But the lamprey actually has to be able to move water in and out of these external gill slits, because if you think about it, it's going to spend much of its life attached to a host. And if it's attached to a host, it's really hard to move water in over the gills. So in order to not suffocate, it has to be able to move fresh water in and out of the gills there. Okay. The other thing you'll want to notice is the lateral line. Now, the lateral line consists of several dots. They are motion detectors, essentially, that work in water. They detect vibrations in water. They're fairly hard to see unless you look up pretty close. And then what it'll look like is just a bunch of little bumps in a row. A really good place to start looking for them is right around the eye, just ventral to the eye here. You'll see a line of little bumps. That's part of the lateral line. But if you keep looking, you can see them in several other areas too. This one has them here. Sometimes you can see them extend down there. If you look on the ventral side of the animal, usually you can pick out these distinct line of dots. They'll be up here around the buccal funnel, here. So, lateral line. Okay, so now let's move on to the buccal funnel itself. So this is the buccal funnel, or the mouth area, but it's not, the whole thing isn't the mouth. Don't get tripped up by that. Don't think that this is the mouth. It is not, okay? This area is the buccal funnel. This is actually the oral disc. Lining the outer edges of the oral disc are papillae. So these little finger-like projections right here, not the beige color stuff that's coming off, but there's actually gray, feathery, finger-like projections. You can see them right there. These papillae help create a good suction up against its host so that the blood meal can pass into the digestive tract. Okay, from there on the oral disc, you might have to remove, if your lamprey has this tissue here, this beige tissue, go ahead and remove it so you can see underneath it. And you can remove as much as you would like. I would recommend actually just taking the time, because you've got time. Take the time to remove most of it. so that you can really see what this looks like. Okay. Now I've still got some left here, and just in the interest of time, I'm not going to detail all of it off, but you can. Okay. From there, you should be able to see more clearly the horny teeth. Okay. These aren't teeth like you have. They're not made of the same sorts of materials, but they are projections that are actually quite sharp. You can push your thumb against them and notice they're quite sharp. They help for attaching to the host. You got to really be able to get a good grip on that host if you're going to be able to hang on to it as that host is swimming through the water. So you have what appear to be individual teeth, but actually, if you look at them, some of them are connected to each other, like these two here are connected, and this one's an individual one. And then you have a big plate of them here. And these actually remove pretty easily, so if you want to do that, you can. And you can see they don't have roots like your teeth do. They're just attached lightly to the oral disc there, but they do hold firm enough for a good grasping surface. And there are lots of them. And that revealed another row beneath. Okay. So those are the horny teeth. Now, the mouth itself is here. Okay. You have to get your probe and go back in there a little. This is the mouth opening. This is not mouth. This is buccal funnel, oral disc. This is mouth. This is what will lead into the digestive tract. If you look carefully within the mouth there, I want to try to remove some of this to expose the teeth there without actually removing the teeth from the tongue. Within the mouth itself, right here, you have tongue. So the tongue is here, and it actually has teeth on the end of it all. Got to be in the frame, don't I? Apologies. Okay, try that again. Tongue, right here. It has teeth on the end of it here. The purpose of that is the tongue can actually project out of the animal. Once it's attached to its host, it can project out of the animal, and the tongue will rasp the skin of the host until it creates a wound that is large enough for it to be able to begin getting its blood meal from. Inside, near this area, internally, which we will see when we do sections, cross sections, there are oral glands that produce an anticoagulant that prevent that blood meal from clotting so that the lamprey can continue to get a constant supply of food from its host. Remember, as adults, these guys are parasitic, right? That's what they're considered, parasitic feeders. Okay, so tongue, mouth opening, oral disc, teeth, papillae, buccal funnel. And you can see how this will attach here to a host. Okay, other external features. I would note, if you can, just look at it to start, the myomeres. Okay, myo meaning muscle. Remember the metameres, meres, segmented. So these are the segmented muscles. If you look carefully, sometimes you can kind of make them out. But there are going to be these sections that run this way. They're just basically muscle sections. They're going to be in pairs. So for every muscle section you get here, you get a muscle section on the opposite side. And as we talked about before, these muscles are in pairs because they can only contract. So if the animal is going to turn this way, muscles here are going to contract and move the animal this way. It's got to have muscles over here that can then contract to move the animal the other way. If it doesn't have the paired muscles, and you can kind of see how the segments come out there, if it doesn't have a paired muscle on the other side here that can contract, these can't stretch themselves. They can only relax and allow themselves to be stretched. So these over here will have to contract in order to move the animal back this way again. Okay, so that should be the external features. The other thing I would note too, we're going to talk about this more. Oh no, we forgot about this down here. Before we get down here, the other thing I would notice here about this animal is the counter shading. You'll notice a lot of aquatic animals have this form of camouflage, just counter shading. You'll see it in the shark too. So the light side is on the ventral side, and then up here there's a darker dorsal side, counter shading. So the dorsal side is darker, the ventral side is lighter, and the purpose of that is, if you think about when you're underwater, if you look up at the water surface, it appears light because the sun is on the other side during daylight, of course. And if you look down into the water, it's dark because you're looking to where the sun is eventually not going to reach as well. So this actually provides really good camouflage in the sense that if an animal is looking down to the dorsal side, this animal appears darker, and if it's looking up at it, because beneath it in the water and it sees this lighter side, it will hide much better because the water will appear lighter in that regard. Okay. Other feature down here where the tail starts. So how much of this is tail? It's kind of like a snake, right? How much of the animal is tail? Head's pretty obvious because it has all those cranial features that we're used to seeing. But then where does tail start? The middle is all body. Tail, the same for a snake, starts at the cloaca. So if you look at the ventral side, you will find, there we go, a cloaca, which is the opening for excretions to pass through. Both reproductive and waste excretions. You will also notice here there should be, sometimes you have to dry it out a little there, this little structure right here projecting from the cloaca. This is the urinary papillae because this is where the archenephric ducts, which drain the kidneys, will actually lead to this here, and the waste that the kidneys have filtered from the blood will exit the body there. So we have tail, cloaca, all the features of the head, the dorsal head, and all the features of the buccal funnel, and you have what you need to know, the external lamprey.